friends at Sylvia Group for having me, and thank you all for being here. Tuesday morning, cybersecurity in your business. This is a general overview, okay? But your participation is certainly encouraged. So I'm going to sit up here and flip my pages with my clicker and talk to you about cybersecurity. But if you have any questions, please interrupt. If you have any scenarios or what should we do for this, I will try to answer the best I can or point you in the direction of someone who you can speak to for your help for your business. Remember that I'm not an underwriter. I'm a partner with Sylvia Group, so if we have any current clients in the room here, there's no red pen. I'm going to go back to my file. None of that. We have a wall between them and the market, so just remember that please speak freely if you feel comfortable doing so. So this slide was actually updated yesterday. The interesting thing when I do these seminars is I constantly have to update my presentation, and it takes a while, but luckily there's a lot of good information out there. So between January 2005 and yesterday, there have been 5,438 data breaches reported. So a lot of data breaches go unreported because a lot of companies try to sweep them under the rug, but these are publicly made breaches that have allowed unauthorized access to over 900 million records. So I'm not going to ask people to raise their hand, but many people have probably been affected by a data breach, whether they like it or not. Whether it's through their healthcare provider, their healthcare insurer. Maybe you had coverage with Anthem a couple of years ago. Maybe you shopped at TJX or one of the TJX companies years ago. Maybe your local fast food restaurant that you visit to get a coffee, or a grocery store that you frequently visit, you've been affected. So unfortunately, as consumers, we've all been impacted by cybersecurity threats. And the threats that we're going to talk about today are simple as negligence, human error, which really is the most common threat, as well as sophisticated attacks, like what we're seeing with WannaCry, which happened a week and a half ago now, as well as just hacking in general. So, what is cyber privacy and security liability? It is a relatively new insurance. It has been around actually really since the late 90s, I would say. It's really developed probably a lot more within the last 5 or 6 years. It's probably taken off really in the last 2 or 3 years. And the reason for that is kind of the evolving landscape. So we've seen a lot of regulation, a lot of statutory requirements to notify customers. So when you, as consumers, have been affected by those breaches, generally you'll get some type of notification, whether that notification's in the mail, whether that notification's by email. So a lot of the time when let's say when the retailer gets information on you, they may only just have your name and email address. They may not have your address, which is sometimes why you will get an email notification. Okay, but this has really started to ramp up in the last couple of years. The coverage has a lot of different coverage parts, which we're going to go through at the end of our presentation. But basically, the way the policy started was it was actually just a liability policy. So it covered insureds for any liability that would arise from unauthorized access to sensitive data. Okay. Now, a majority of the insurance and the liability coverage is still there, but a majority of the coverage actually lies in the breach response coverage. So the insured's duties to respond to the breach, and we'll go through some of those duties. So I do use a couple of cartoons in our presentation just to lighten the mood a little bit. And phishing scams. Okay? These are happening every single day. They are simple, they are sophisticated, and as you can see here, usually 1 out of 3 people fall victim to some type of phishing scam. And unfortunately, the phishing scams now are very real. Sometimes before you could tell that it was kind of fake, but now they are becoming more and more sophisticated and look really truly like an email from that store or from your financial institution that you do banking with, and they look real. The problem is that you have guys like here who's entering their bank account information and it's getting in the wrong hands. Or you're getting a request from someone who's been working at the company for 20 years to change an account number. And little do they know that that person on the other end of that email is in a foreign country, asking you to wire money, and imposing or posturing one of your partners or vendors. Okay, so let's talk about some of the types of information that these bad actors or what some of these situations are just being released from a pure negligence standpoint. Personally identifiable information, or what we call PII, social security numbers, driver's license information, passport numbers, banking records, date of birth, sometimes even your mother's maiden name, your email address in combination with any password or security question. Yes. So in the state of Massachusetts, you actually need to write 3 different letters. You need to write letters to the affected people, you need to write letters to the AG, and I believe you also need to write one more letter to, I think it's some type of privacy commissioner or cybersecurity officer within the state. And they all have to look a little bit different, they all have to say different things. The letters are very vague. The letters are gonna say, hey, this may have happened, we're not sure on the details of the on the incident. Don't ever say the B word, the breach. Don't use, that's actually a legal term. So don't ever say, always say incident, or we're investigating the issue, but never say the B word, okay? So, when these breaches occur, when these incidents occur, PII is one of those things that, is frequently unauthorized, okay? Now, unfortunately, as business owners, or working for a business, we have to take some of this stuff. We have to take it from our employees, number one, right? They need to get paid. We need to provide them health insurance. So in addition, we may ask for some PHI, personal health information, which is actually a defined term under HIPAA. That includes medical records, health status, provision of health care, payment for health care. Okay? And last but not least, we like to get paid too. Okay, this is a way for OCR to generate revenue. So if you violate, a privacy policy, or if you violate any form of wrongful, unauthorized access to information, or if you don't encrypt information, and you're a healthcare organization, and this gets out in the public eye, whether you're a small organization or whether you're a large hospital, chances are there's going to be an investigation. Yes?
Will you be touching on the, was it Mass CMR 29?
201,
Yeah.
7, yep, we're going to talk a little bit about that. We are.
Excuse me, I don't want to get too into the weeds, but those settlements you just talked about,
Yep.
were those simple negligence or were they knowing and willful? In other words, I think you understand the distinction there. In other words, you can not know a rule and screw up, and yeah, you still have consequences of that. But is it, were they able to prove? I mean, those are large settlements. Were they able to prove that someone at an executive level said, "Now we're not going to bother with that right now"?
Now we have seen that. We've seen both. A lot of the times it is negligence, but with the resolution agreement, there are proactive measures that they have to put in place within a certain time period. So basically, what OCR wants, besides your money, is they want to see you improve your security as well. But, we think that stuff's encrypted, and then all of a sudden, 1 out of 100 is not encrypted. Whether it's a thumb drive. How can we ensure that every thumb drive within our 1,000 employees that we have, when they're taking work home on a weekend, and they go on the T on the way home, and they lose medical information, or they lose social security numbers, or whatever the information is, how is an IT professional, let's say you're an information officer, or chief security officer at a company, how do you guarantee controlling your employees is the hardest thing? You can have firewalls,
Yeah.
you can do all this stuff, you can have all the security, you can lock file cabinets, but at the end of the day, people are constantly moving
Right.
and taking work home with them. And I can't tell you how many people, or personally as a patient or as a customer, I've seen physicians pick up their keyboard and have their passwords right underneath. 4 years ago, I had surgery on my wrist. I played hockey my whole entire life, and I had surgery on my wrist. And I met with this orthopedic surgeon. I was living in Connecticut at the time. Great guy. He was giving me a ton of advice, and he was showing me pictures kind of pre-surgery and kind of what he would do and the whole thing. And we go into his office, and it's probably 5:30 on a Tuesday, and he picks up his keyboard, and there are all of his passwords. And I said, would you mind just showing me what you just looked at? He goes, yeah, these are all my passwords. I can't remember every password. We have so many. And I said, well, after you give me advice for what I should do for my wrist, let's sit down and let me talk to you a little bit about what I do, because that is rule number one. Now, here's a doctor who is very senior within a very large organization, and how can the IT person really control that? Are they gonna go around every office and make sure that passwords aren't, sticky to the monitors, or under the, or written down somewhere? It's hard to do. It's very, very hard to do, and that's why we continue to see these type of incidents happening. And a lot of it is human error. A lot of it is negligence. And then even scarier, a lot of it just recently has been more of the bad actors. I'm gonna flip towards this really quick just to show you. Anybody hear about WannaCry? National global news, right? Okay? Oops, your files have been encrypted. Okay, most of these demands were $300. Okay? Look, the best part about this whole screen is contact us. There are organizations in Russia, in a lot of other countries, where this is organized crime. These are companies. These are companies that will penetrate people with ransomware, and they get employee benefits. They come in at 8, they leave at 5, they get paid time off. And these guys are hackers that run companies. And when you contact them, a nice woman will pick up and say, oh, hi, Mr. Beauregard, thanks for calling. Are you ready to send your $300 worth of Bitcoin in order to get your files back? All right, let me help you out. It's a real company. These are real companies that are doing this kind of stuff. And the countries don't care because, for a lot of reasons, won't go there, but they don't care, and this is a way for them to generate revenue. So there was a great article a couple weeks ago in an insurance journal that we subscribe to called Advising, and the title of the article was, Hackers Get Smarter, Demands Get Smaller. So this is a volume play for these guys. They're hitting people at $300 a whack, and it's on the personal side and the consumer and the business side, and they're just looking for people to pay the $300. And they hope that they'll get the encryption key in order to unlock the computer. And we hope that they will leave us alone. But who are we to trust these people? So, I know we have a question, yes?
More of a comment, I mean, I don't know if your last statement was rhetorical, but, I'm an IT person. So, what's made it easier is to be proactive, where
Yep.
I make sure anybody needs a memory stick, they come, and what they get handed is one that's got a hardware encryption chip.
Nice.
If they're having trouble with passwords, we hand them out a program to keep their passwords encrypted and do
Like
automatic
a
login.
LastPass or something like that.
Exactly, so
Excellent.
by staying ahead of the need and the demand is the way to solve the problem, not wait until it happens
100%.
and then be
Yeah,
reactive.
not to put you on the spot, but do you guys do any security awareness training or anything like that, or?
Well, I do it for companies, yes.
For companies,
Yeah.
okay, that's great.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, the unfortunate thing, there's a lot of people that aren't like what you're doing. There's a lot of people that have departments that are 30, 50, 100 people, and they have thousands of employees, and it's difficult to control that risk. For the smaller companies, they actually have an easier time, but they don't have the capital to keep up with a lot of the security that's out there because it's expensive. Encryption obviously used to be something that was much more expensive 5 years ago than it is now. I mean, those little thumb drives are much cheaper now than they used to be, right?
It's incrementally more expensive.
Right.
And with a hardware encryption chip on them, they're unbreakable.
So from a proactive standpoint, if I were to stick in a thumb drive on my computer,
Yeah.
it wouldn't work. My IT guy is just disabled that. Now, as insurance brokers, we're not on the personal line side, we're not on the life and health side or anything like that. So we don't really have any sensitive data. We don't even do general liability, so we don't even have driver's license numbers or anything. We have sensitive data as in
You could disable the
corporate confidential
disable
information.
the USB ports.
Yep,
on-
so we
on
disable
computers.
all.
Yep.
Yeah, I was just replying to an email from a client in London before we started, and we access our network too via VPN through a log me in type of device. And it's great. I can't download anything to my laptop from there. It allows me to do my work. It's all encrypted. So my laptop's encrypted. My laptop's also right there. Never leave it in your car. If it is, you can go get it.
Don't leave it in a rental car
Don't leave it in the
with
rental
your
car.
driver's license tucked inside the sun visor,
Wow.
please.
So many tips.
That sounds like experience.
Oh, yeah.
So this stuff happens. This stuff happens. So here are some of the industries affected, and I'm sorry for how small this is. This is actually from an incident response report. The next couple slides from Baker Hotsteller. Baker Hotsteller is a breach coach or a law firm that works with Beasley. They work with a lot of our markets. They actually helped the client that John and I had an issue with, not an issue, a breach with a couple weeks ago. So you can see a lot of industries are affected. Financial services, education, and healthcare and retail are the top, I guess, industries, if you will. No surprise, they have a lot of data. We are actually starting to see a lot of professional service type of claims, really on the law firm side. Because if you think about what lawyers have, and they have to keep it for a long time, so they're having more incidents. Unfortunately, government's in there as well. We've seen a lot of governments, IRS, states, municipalities have incidents as well. We recently just had an incident in New York with a municipality where Russian hackers accessed the network through ransomware. And they spent about $80,000, $90,000 just on that incident alone. Below you can see kind of size by revenue, company breakdown, private, public, nonprofit. Interesting to see though, in this particular, we see a lot of companies under 50 million, so a lot of small businesses, what we would call small middle market business, under 50 million with over 25% in this. So the reason why is they don't have the resources, like we were just talking about, they don't have the resources, so they're an easy target. And obviously 32% of the larger companies, because they have more data, it's a bigger public risk. Here are the top causes for data breaches. Look how many different types of things can happen. All right. 14% from vendors. What's a vendor? We all use them. Cleaning people that come in at night, the shredding guy that comes once a week, the payroll service, the electronic medical record hosting provider, a cloud provider,
That was the Target breach, was a vendor.
HVAC contractor, Fazio Mechanical, little private company. They were connected to the payment card network with Target, and that's how the hackers got through. I think it was like a 17 or 18-year-old kid, bought the malware online for $2,300, was able to connect to Target from an HVAC contractor, because what do HVAC contractors do? They have control of the heating and air conditioning, and guess what? That's all run by computers or electronics.
Probably running a 5 or 10-year-old operating system. There's a lot of physical control stuff is running old XP still.
Yep.
That's how WannaCry, that was all old operating systems.
You're 100% right, so that's why WannaCry wasn't that big in the United States. So we did a breach response seminar in Albany last Tuesday, and a couple guys from Beasley were there, and Beasley handled over 5,000 breaches, I think, since 2009, or some ridiculous number. The meeting was 3 hours long. He had 38 breaches come in during that time, and none of them were from WannaCry. So he brings out his BlackBerry during the meeting, and he goes, let's just see how many breaches I have. And he said, all right, 38. not one was from WannaCry. He said, why? He goes, WannaCry is driving me nuts. Everyone's coming out of the woodwork and writing all these, articles, and it's, clogging my LinkedIn homepage and the whole thing. It's actually gonna affect a lot more foreign countries than it did in the US, because a lot of the security patching, a lot of the old software is out of our networks compared to in foreign countries where it's still running. Alright, so we talked a little bit about this. So, just point out a couple things about the WannaCry. So, they basically gave you a timeline on the left-hand side, or a countdown. The payment request would go up if you did not pay within that certain amount of time, and your files will be lost on the left-hand side. So, this is pretty interesting. I actually just found this out. I thought a few months ago that a lot of this stuff was individuals or groups. The individuals really don't exist too much. The groups definitely do, but the actually organized businesses that are out there, that's predominantly the breaches that we're seeing. The interesting thing is the carriers are actually tracking this stuff, because they have the ability through some of their vendors to talk to these bad actors via the dark web. Don't ask me how that happens. I've never seen it happen. But now the question is do you pay it or not? The FBI says no. Some people are saying, well, it's $300. Am I gonna lose all my pictures from my grandkids? Do I want no one to find out? What if I'm an employee and I clicked on it and no one will find out? It's $300, who cares? I just got hired here, I don't wanna lose my job, maybe I'll just pay for it.
Oh,
That can happen, and it has. So, what we suggest is to call us, or call your insurance carrier. A lot of insurance carriers have a hotline. Unfortunately, a lot of this ransomware happens on Friday at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock. Your policies, if you are a policy holder, there's a 1-800 number. It's a 24-hour hotline. I save it in my phone. You look through my phone, I have all my carriers' 1-800 numbers for breach response hotlines. Because that Saturday morning when someone calls you, which has happened to me, and you're out with your family and someone says, hey, we had something happen, who do we call? Send them a text with the number. So if you do have a policy, throw it in your phone. I think it is something good to have, just in case. Obviously we're buying the insurance just in case. We're doing all the right things to be proactive, encrypting, doing security awareness training. But unfortunately, these breaches are still happening, and they're happening in a lot of different spaces. So hackers, we haven't talked about employees yet. Love them or hate them, they have access to a lot of information. We had a 20-year employee who was going for a VP position at a large nonprofit in Connecticut. Didn't get it, they hired an outside person. He wrongfully took life insurance information, dumped it in the trash. That included US and Canadian residents. Okay? Rogue employees. Number one, are they covered? Yes. Okay, they are covered under the policy. If you're the CEO of the company and you do it, it's not covered. It's an intentional act by, a director or officer of the company, not covered. But if it's, Sally in accounting, or someone who's been a long-term employee, who's not a C-level executive, they would be covered. Outsourcing third-party vendors, we did talk a little bit about that. And what are they accessing? Remember that this is cyber insurance, but we cover paper too. So if you have paper that's floating around, and we all like to be paperless, paper can still get out. We had an incident the other day, a text message type of incident. We've had incidents of people at a bar, physicians having a drink after work, talking about a patient, mentions her name, maybe has one or too many cocktails, mentions her name, the diagnosis, person next to them hears. Now that one was interesting. That one actually happened in Maine, and guess what the person requested from the hospital? gift card to their favorite steak restaurant in town. Weird, you know, obviously not something that, you know, is gonna be a large incident, but we are seeing a lot of different types of incidents throughout all the breaches that we're handling. So I just added this slide recently, asking the right questions, getting the right answers. You know, because as executives of a company or as a board member or C-level people, you know, what are CEOs or what should they be asking from or about cybersecurity? So here's something that the U.S. Department of Homeland Security suggests that, you know, leaders should be asking. So 5 questions CEOs should be asking about cyber risk. How is our executive leadership informed about the current level and business impact of cyber risk to our company? So are people asking questions? Do we have an idea of what would happen if? You know, what is the current level and business impact of cyber risk to our company? What's our plan to identify these risks? Do we have policies and procedures in place? Do we have a business continuity plan? Do we have a disaster recovery plan? Do we have an incident response plan? Okay? Now, those 3 things that I just mentioned, you can actually really get for free. If you're a policyholder of one of our carriers, most of them have risk management portals. You can log on to that risk management portal, you can get training, you can get sample policies and procedures, and those are all available online and free. If you have an IT consultant that you work with or someone, they will probably have plans for you as well. How does our cybersecurity program apply industry standards and best practices? So, for example, one term we haven't mentioned too much yet is PCI, payment card industry. Are we compliant with PCI? Now we're accepting payment card information. How much of it are we accepting? Are we compliant? Do we have a new chip reader? No. Where are we at with that? How many types of cyber incidents do we detect in a normal week? You know, obviously spam filters and things like that, and bad IPs can come through. How comprehensive is our cyber incident response plan, and how often is it tested? So you can have all these policies and procedures in place. They're probably sitting in a drawer somewhere, but no one knows how they actually work. So what we suggest is sit down and do a tabletop. Test your incident response plan. Friday, 4 o'clock. You know, I'm the CEO, I'm on the Cape, someone else is wherever they are. What happens? How do we test it? Do we have a phone tree? You know, do I have John's cell phone number? Does he have my cell phone number? You know, how does this whole thing work if something bad were to happen? And unfortunately, they all happen at inconvenient times, like Memorial Day weekend. So to make matters worse, and I'm not a lawyer, but there's a lot of laws around this. And unfortunately, and interestingly enough, some of these laws have been around since the 80s. Okay? And a lot of them are industry specific. Some of them are state specific. But if you have information on a resident from that state, like in Massachusetts, if you're a Rhode Island business, if you're a Connecticut business, but you have information on Massachusetts residents, guess what? You have to comply with Mass GL 201 CMR 17. Okay? High tech. It's an extension of HIPAA. It was enforced in 2009. HIPAA, FERPA, Gramm-Leach-Bliley applies to financial institutions. That went in effect in 1999. So a lot of different laws in force, and on top of that, each state has their own breach notification law. So Massachusetts has one, New York has one, Connecticut has one, and even if you're a Massachusetts business, but you have customers from all over New England, let's say, or maybe you're an online customer, online business, and you have people that, you know, order online and they live in California, or they live in Chicago, or what about the people that live 6 months in a day in Florida, but they have a summer house in Dartmouth, and they're there for 5 months. They're Florida residents. So technically, if a breach occurs, you have to notify them based on where they reside at the time of the breach. So just because they have a place in Dartmouth doesn't mean that we're gonna notify them based on mass notification laws. We actually have to notify them based on Florida notification laws, because that's where their residence is. Sounds easy, right? One reason why a lot of our insureds purchase these policies is for the ease, for the breach response help. When John and I had that customer who called us, and I think they did call us on a Friday, when they had this incident, you can lean on privacy attorneys to help you with this. You're not gonna be licking stamps and envelopes, sending out notification letters on your own. We're here to help you get in touch with the right people, and they're there to help you and pay for all of these costs. All right? Now, in order to figure out how many customers were affected and so on, you may need some forensic help. You may need for someone to do some type of forensic discovery and figure out, what was on that laptop. Do we notify everybody? Do we notify just the people that were affected on the laptop? Was the laptop encrypted? If your laptop's encrypted and you live in Massachusetts, okay, there's actually a safe harbor for notification. So you don't really have to do anything. So here are the typical costs. All right, I just talked about policy paying for. This is what, yes.
What does the safe harbor mean?
Safe harbor means you don't have to notify. So if let's say you were to lose a thumb drive, let's say one falls out of your pocket,
Right.
all right, and that thumb drive is encrypted, and it had 100 of your clients, all right. Say, let's just make up that you're a CPA, and you have all your tax returns that just fell out of your pocket, and they're encrypted. You don't have to do anything. Okay. So encryption is a measure that can help companies from paying these. All right. So this is what carriers pay, by the way. This is what the insurance carriers pay for, and they get a different cost than we do. That's right, or whatever. Equifax, and you sign up for credit monitoring, you're going to pay maybe $15.99 or $19.99 a month, kind of the going rate. The carriers will pay more on the 15 side, $15 per person per year, because they buy it in bulk. Because they're sending so many notifications and so many credit monitoring letters that they're able to get that at a better cost. It's like buying paper towels at Costco. The more you buy, the cheaper per roll. Same scenario here. So the interesting thing about credit monitoring is it's generally offered for free. It's not required by law, except for Connecticut. It's the only state. I think that more states will copycat Connecticut and require credit monitoring, but it's not required yet, except for by law in Connecticut. Interesting thing about data breaches, though, is that when they happen, when the credit monitoring is offered to affected individuals, only 10 to 15 people sign up for it. It's free. It's with Equifax or All Clear ID or one of those companies. Why is that? Well, there's an irony to credit monitoring. There's also a numbness that Americans have to data breaches, because there's been so many. So the issue with credit monitoring, people find, is they open the credit monitoring application, and what's the first question on there? What's your social security number? So this company just had a breach. ABC company just had a breach. They're offering me credit monitoring, that's great. Equifax, I go online, I sign up, and I'm gonna get a free year of credit monitoring, but they're asking me for all this personal information. And the funny thing is Equifax has breaches all the time. Experian has breaches all the time. TransUnion has breaches all the time. So why would I give another person my information? So that's why we see such a low acceptance rate. It's in good faith as business owners to offer it, but not everyone's gonna sign up for it. All right, the average total cost of a breach, $665,000. That's for small and middle market businesses. Average cost for large companies, which I think is over, I think that it's either 250 million or 5 million or 500 million, is just under $6 million. Claim defense, average cost to defend claims. Now remember, we'll get to this part of in a little bit, but remember that there's first party and third party coverage within these policies. So there's a difference here between, this is the first party coverage, because you haven't been sued yet, you simply just had the incident, you're responding to the breach, and this is your third party coverage, liability. Okay. Average settlements and judgments, right around 800, 900,000. Okay, these are all from Net Diligence. Net Diligence is a company that we partner with who does claim studies. We actually supply them with some data on current claims that we have, and they come up with these reports. Here are some recent settlements. So TJX, most people remember that, 2007, right? 256 million. Guess what? They didn't buy cyber insurance. Target, they bought $90 million worth of coverage. Not enough. They spent, I think, right around 350, 400 million so far on average. Okay, so granted, these are large companies. These are what you're going to see in the news. You know, most of us don't work for these companies. I certainly don't work for a large company like that. But even 256 million to TJX, I don't want to call it chump change to them, but for them, it's, you know, obviously a large loss. But imagine if it was 500,000 or 600,000, or the average breach cost of 665,000 to your company, right? The great thing about cyber is that there are so many markets, insurance carriers involved now in so many different solutions, that minimum premiums years ago were $10,000. And now minimum premiums are as low as $1,000. If you're a small business that does less than $1 million in revenue, you're gonna pay $1,000 for your cyber insurance policy. Now granted, if you're a $10 million or $20 million company or whatever, obviously it depends on your size and your scope. But that's cheaper than your car insurance. I mean, if you're a CPA firm that does 600,000 in revenue, you're gonna pay $1,000. It's very, very affordable, and that's for $1 million limit. Here are some of the regulatory actions. Does everyone remember the Mass General Hospital claim? The woman was on home on the T, and she left behind some personal health information in paper format. AG, OCR, $1 million claim. Blair Group, restaurant group in Boston, $250,000. So some of you might be saying, well, I have this coverage, that's great. First of all, if you want to go over that in private, we certainly can with your Sylvia representative. If you have questions, we can go over it. Because every policy is different. For the folks that don't purchase it, you might be saying, well, how does my D&O not cover this? Or how does my professional liability or my GL or my property? Actually, a lot of these policies out there now have exclusions for this. Because cyber insurance claims have been picked up in the past because of coverage counsel that has gotten GL carriers to pay for this. That TJX breach, 40 million of it was paid by the GL carrier. Coverage counsel doing their job, getting that done. But E&O is going to cover for your professional services, crime. Now crime covers money and securities. Remember that cyber policies cover information and the theft of information or the unauthorized access of information. Your property policy is going to cover tangible property. Electronic information is intangible property. So if there's any damage to any of that property, it's not going to be covered under your property form. Actually, most GL policies now have cyber exclusions on them. Most crime policies do too, same with D&O. So here's the coverage, okay? We've talked about the information that can be lost. We've talked about the types of incidents that can occur. We've talked about the cost. We've talked about recent settlements. Here's the coverage. All right, so this is what's being offered. Remember, you have two buckets. First bucket is first party loss. Second bucket is third-party loss, okay? First-party breach response expenses. So breach occurs, lost laptop, hacker, cost to hire a breach coach. We talked a little bit about Baker Hostetler. They're one of those breach coaches. They're gonna walk you through the whole entire process with us, but they are going to be your counsel. They do not represent a carrier. They represent you, okay? They're actually gonna hire the forensic investigator on your behalf. Anybody know why? To protect privilege. So if the law firm hires the forensics firm, they can hide it from discovery. If you hire the forensics firm, it can be discoverable in court. Okay? What if you're doing a forensics report and you find some really bad stuff? And it's discoverable in court. Or an AG gets their hands on it. If you're a law firm and that attorney-client privilege happens, it's not discoverable, it protects you. So if a breach occurs, don't go out and hire Mandian, don't go out and hire Charles River Associates. Wait. The breach coach will hire them for you, and they will actually recommend someone. Unless you have a prearranged agreement with us or with your insurance carrier, the breach coach will hire on your behalf. Cost to notify affected individuals. I mentioned you're not going to be licking stamps and envelopes. We're going to have a service that does that for you. We're going to have a service that offers the credit monitoring. We're going to have a service that has a call center. And you're going to help us with answering some of these questions. All right, let's say it gets out in the paper. It's on Channel 7. It's on Channel 5. You need some PR help. That's all covered. Now, you haven't been sued yet. You've simply just had an incident and you're responding. So remember, the breach response is going to help you with the response process. One thing we've seen a lot more lately is actually additional first-party type of coverages, like business interruption. Okay? Let's say you're an online store. It's the week before Christmas. Hacker penetrates your system, shuts you down. You lose out on sales. You incur extra expenses. You have a loss of income. The cyber business interruption is going to cover you for that. Okay? So similar to business interruption on your property, if unfortunately you have a fire and you have a loss of income and extra expenses, the policy is going to pay for it. Same thing on the cyber side, but your structure, your building is still there, your servers are still in the server room, but your website is down, and it was down because of an attack. And cyber extortion. Cyber extortion covers ransomware. Ransomware is a relatively new term. Cyber extortion's actually been around for a long time, and that would address that. That is typically a reimbursement coverage. Why? Because the carriers want to reimburse you for it. They don't want to directly pay, because what if it's a terrorist group asking for the ransom? So that is a reimbursement form. And a lot of times, what's interesting about those type of incidents is the FBI even wants to keep it secret, because they don't want it to be public, because they don't want the hackers to know that they know that they're in their system. So remember that they're on your side to help you out during that investigation, because nothing more than they want to do is catch those bad guys. So we've actually had incidents where we haven't told our insurance carrier, and our insured hasn't told us, because the FBI told them not to. So what do you do in that case? Well, the FBI told me not to report this to my insurance carrier. So John and I don't know anything that's going on. Your insurance carrier doesn't know anything that's going on. And FBI says, excuse me, but do not report this. What do? You listen to it. The carriers understand that the FBI has the best intention of catching those bad people. And if they're put in a good position where they're tracking them and tracking some of their activity, because chances are if they're going after your company, they're going after multiple people's companies within this group here. So we've actually seen that happen quite a bit. We actually had a nurse girlfriend, hacker boyfriend situation like that, where nurse at a hospital in California, boyfriend was a hacker. She was stealing personal health information, bringing it home bits and pieces, and he was selling identities on the black web. It was not reported for 30 days to the carrier. the FBI actually found to be the best. So, a lot of interesting different situations out there, but I'd love to talk to you more about the R6 stuff. Any other questions before we move on? Only a couple more slides. I want to leave plenty of time for questions. So we talked about first party loss. Yes? Okay, one more.
Sorry about that. So the insurance company negotiates this with the hacker?
With the hacker?
With the ransomware, sorry.
Oh, they can negotiate, yeah. The insurance company wouldn't themselves. They actually have vendors that they use. And a lot of them are ex-FBI people, because all the ex-FBI people are making some real good money in the private sector now. So if you look at Kroll, you look at K2 Intelligence, you look at Crypsys, you look at some of these forensics firms that are out, they're all ex-FBI, CIA type of folks that are now in the private sector. And they have the ability to, first of all, hold Bitcoin, so they can pay on your behalf, number one. Number two, they also have the ability to talk to these guys through the dark web. So if they're requesting $15,000 worth of Bitcoin, they may be able to negotiate that down to 10 or 7. So we just had $12,000 worth of Bitcoin requested from a customer. They're an online company that sells coffee supplies and paper and stuff to small businesses. It's an online platform where you can go on and order whatever you want for your company. They just had an incident, a ransomware incident, and the firm was able to negotiate the ransomware down, the extortion payment. So it's not the carrier doing it, it's one of the carrier's vendors. And it's smart because the carrier saves money. But remember, ransomware payments need to be approved by underwriters before you pay them. So just remember that don't just go pay $50,000 worth of Bitcoin and then ask for your money back. It does need to be approved by underwriters before, and that's all markets. There's really no way to validate it. With Bitcoin, it goes bye-bye. So there could be a lot of fraud on that side. Any more questions? Third-party loss, easy, we're gonna fly through this. So really any suits that are brought because of the incident are gonna fall in this space, okay? In these terms that, we mentioned, failure to implement and maintain reasonable security measures, you may be, at fault for not doing that. Negligence, violation of privacy, invasion of privacy. PCI fines, penalties. That's a third-party coverage as well. You can get that coverage if you're PCI compliant. If you're not, we will try to help you, but you generally will either get a very small limit or nothing at times if you're not compliant. That would also include any regulatory investigations, fines, penalties, as well as defense. So dealing with the security breach, we've talked a little bit about this. Data breach team, incident response plan team needs to be in place. You need to be compliant with these laws. There are 47 now, there's going to be 48 in a couple weeks. New Mexico's finally jumping on the breach notification requirement. The benefits of a cyber insurance policy. This coverage is out there. It is really great right now. It is certainly a buyer's market. I mentioned a lot of carriers and minimum premiums. That's great for the consumers. It's not necessarily great for me, but this coverage is very affordable. There's a lot of coverage involved in it. I would just tell you that if you have the coverage, or if you're looking at the coverage, make sure you understand it. Make sure you understand the breach process, because it is unique. Don't just go pay ransoms. If you have an incident, call the hotline. If you ever have a question on it, any of us can certainly talk to you about it, because each policy is different. And you want to make sure that you're doing your responsibility as a policyholder to comply with the policy language, because at the end of the day, the contract is between you and the insurance carrier. Yes?
Do policies like that cover punitive damages?
Yes, they do, under the regulatory. Yep. So one more comic. So you got in this corner, we have firewalls, encryption, antivirus, and in this corner, we have Dave. There's Dave with the human error about to click on a link. So this was recently used in a breach response seminar that we did for a retirement system. And kind of recycling it here, but I thought it was kind of a nice segue to talk a little bit about some of the risk management that's available out there. This is actually from our friends at McDonald Hopkins. They're another breach coach. Here's just some things that you can do. And everyone has a copy of the presentation, so if you ever want to talk more about this, please feel free to reach out. But a lot of this stuff too is available on your risk management portal.
When you say reach out to you or reach out to our?
Oh, reach out to your representative at Sylvia, and then
The business card
we
and.
could get in touch with me. You know, we're partners in this, but we would prefer that you reach out to them first, and then to us. You know, usually it can be a conference call or a meeting. Here are 10 insurance tips. Again, I'm not going to go through all of them, but you know, make sure your insurance matches the conduct of business that you do. Don't just buy it to buy it. Like I mentioned earlier, understand what you're getting into. The industry's getting better, but there are a lot of different terms and conditions out there. There's a lot of different policy language out there. The way policies work are all different. You know, just because someone's making you buy a $10 million limit, don't think that you need to actually comply with that. We actually have been helping some of our clients push back on that. I had a client this morning that said, hey, I need $10 million of coverage. They're a $900,000 company in New York City. They do software development, and Coca-Cola's making them buy $10 million. Now, is that better for me if they buy $10 million? Sure. But do they really need $10 million? You know, is this just some corporate counsel, in-house counsel at Coca-Cola giving them an ironclad contract? Probably. Are they even really going to have access to any networks? Are they going to have access to records? No. We're actually just helping them develop a mobile app. Who cares? Make them buy 5. Save them some money. So we do work with you on that. We'll also give you an idea of how much to buy. You know, we'd rather see you get something rather than nothing, so maybe a $1 or a $2 million limit is appropriate. For our larger customers, we are able to provide some benchmark and let you know what your peers are buying. We can't tell you the name, but let's say you're a municipality, hey, here's what the people in the area are buying. You know, these guys just bought $3 million. You know, maybe you should look at one. They're a little bit bigger than you are. We also might ask you about your records. So what kind of information do you have? You know, do you have socials? Do you have health information? You know, maybe you should consider buying a little bit of a higher limit if you're highly enforced by regulatory. So if you're in the healthcare space and you're subject to HIPAA, you know, we would probably recommend a little bit of a higher limit than, let's say, if you're, you know, a firm with no HIPAA information and just employee data. So if you're a manufacturer, your risk might be a little bit lower, but you might have more of a business interruption type of threat, where the doctor office is maybe going to be able to still provide patient care, so that their BI costs might be a little lower. Unfortunately, there's no exact method or formula in recommending limits. We recommend limits based on experience, based on peer groups and benchmark that we have internally. Unlike property, where you can take a value of a property and stick a limit on it, I would love if that could happen. But we have insureds that maybe buy too much. We have insureds that definitely buy too little. So going through the process and understanding the coverage and buying the correct limit is certainly important. Think about it, buying insurance for your home. You know, you're not going to buy something that is way underinsured. So we really do try to provide some value with that. So in conclusion, it's not if but when, right? You've heard that before in the insurance industry. This stuff does happen. It's a great time to get the coverage. Again, as I mentioned, the carriers are offering a lot. They're offering not only a lot of coverage, the premiums are you know, at their lowest. The cost may be significant. You know, there are legal ramifications. you need to abide by, or maybe influenced by if there's an investigation. Your general insurance, you know, if you're not buying the coverage, chances are this is a hole in your insurance portfolio. We recommend obviously filling that hole. Again, it's readily available. A lot of coverage is out there. We also, I mentioned a lot of my sources throughout this. A lot of these are friends in the business that allow us to use their data. This is cyberinquirer.com, it's a blog. Not that we all need another email in our box, but he releases, you know, a couple things a year. A lot of good information coming out on data breaches and so on, if you're interested.
We have contact information available to Chaz, for John on the last slide of the PowerPoint. Jill is always available too, for any of her clients or anyone else who would like to speak with her. So, thank you very much for coming in here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great question.